Is the automobile dealer model set for a major disruption by someone? I think it is, and I think it's been far too long in coming. So welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I'm John, and this is a little bee in my bonnet today, which is, well, auto dealerships. I hate them. Does anybody really love going to their dealership? And I think this is an industry that is absolutely ripe for disruption. And I think the dealers need to be the ones to step up and lead it. So let's talk about how we got to here first. Back at the beginning, the dawn of the automobile industry, cars were sold any number of different ways. In fact, there was one manufacturer I read somewhere that they actually sold it on an installment plan, which means you bought individual parts and assembled it on your own. With about the time of the Model N from Ford, they began signing up dealers. And back in the day, you had somebody who had a gas station with an auto shop, and there was a couple Fords for sale out in front of it. They were happy to take your orders, but Ford realized they could expand very, very quickly, much more quickly than they could, and certainly before they could staff up and train everybody and oversee everybody on a nationwide scale. This became the format that we use largely still to this day. The manufacturer sells it to a dealer, the dealer sells it and services it. And that also has some benefits. It brings it to your local community. There's a local person who lives here who should care about your community. They sponsor ball games and things like that. The service people, maybe you get to know. It provides employment locally. It provides hopefully more regional, more local service around them. And the dealership model also is supposed to foster competition. For example, if Ford owned 3 dealerships near me, they could set the price at all of them. So my choice would be, if I wanted a truck and I really wanted an F-150, but they were all priced exactly the same, the only way to get a deal would be to talk to the Chevy dealer or the Dodge dealer. Or I guess Toyota and Nissan. Dealership model allows them to compete with each other. Now, I think a lot of this has been erased with the consolidation of the industry into huge dealership organizations like Sonic, for example. But mostly the dealers over the decades have made the sales process so miserable, I don't think competition is working. They have purposefully made their sales process take as long as possible and be as emotionally exhausting as possible so that you don't want to go anywhere else. That's why consumers act like they do when they come onto a dealership lot where they just want to be left alone, right? Well, the reason is because they know if they are interested in the car, it becomes this long drawn out negotiation. You always hear stories about the dealer holds the keys after they test drive the car, and hours of negotiations to get an extra $100 off the price. If you don't get what you want, at the end of it, you're exhausted. What are the chances you're going to drive to another Ford dealer and start the same process over again? So I think fundamentally they've broken down where the dealership holds the inventory and you have to go see it there. And if they don't have exactly what you want, you have to drive to a different dealership. And then if you get into the sales process, well, it's just too painful to leave. But they further made it even worse because as their profit margins have been squeezed on new cars, they found new ways to add to their profit margins, which just adds to frustrations for consumers. For example, years ago, new cars were pretty profitable, but they've been shrinking the difference between the MSRP and the invoice price that the dealership nominally holds. Now that amount is what your salesperson is paid off of, but then the dealership gets a holdback from the manufacturer. Not every manufacturer does this, most do, and it can vary to 3%, something like that, but that's just extra gravy for them. The fact is most dealers make far more money on the used cars they sell than they do the new ones. But to continue to make the new ones profitable, they start adding more stuff to it. Infamously, there are dock fees which are now printed on the actual invoice so you can't go change it. Many times you go to a dealership, certainly in my area, where they've added security etching, they've added an interior stain resistant treatment, they've added another underbody coat, whatever it happens to be. All of these are not negotiable. They will not negotiate on it. They might come down off the price, but they're not going to negotiate the individual items, and you can't say, I won't take that, mark it off, because they already did it. This just adds more frustration. If I'm looking at that $50,000 truck and I walk in there and it's 54 because they've done all this other stuff, I don't want it. I believe it's a scam. I don't care what you say, but I don't have a choice other than going to a dealership that doesn't do it, which is very few of them now. Specifically for us, when my son, I think a couple of years ago now, went to buy his car, it was used. We test drove several. He decided exactly what he wanted: year range, color, engine. And we found it at a local Nissan dealer. We walked in there, they had 2 salespeople working. The one guy we got to work with was helping 2 other people. We got no personal attention. They would not come down on the price. Well, I think they came down a little bit, but then they wanted to tack on, I believe it was $1,500 transportation fee, because they had brought it from another dealership. That's not our problem. But that's the kind of games they play. And that's before you get into the business office, where they're going to try to sell you extended warranties and all of this other stuff. They've made it unbelievably complex and time consuming in an effort to pad their profits every step of the way. Now compare this with the last time we bought a car, which we still had to go through a traditional dealer. We went to our credit union, got pre-approved, had a blank check, walked in, test drove a car, here's your check. And we walked away. Simple. They weren't happy. They didn't get some extra profit along the way, but it was much simpler. And similar experiences when I've been to CarMax. Do you like this car? Do you like this car? Here you go. Yep, you're approved. Do you want 48 months, 60 months, or 72 months? Check. I mean, it still might take an hour to an hour and a half, but it's not half a day. I think that the COVID restrictions have really are going to put the pressure on dealerships. Number one, they have limited inventory. Number two, people have gotten far more used to buying things at home, whether it's small items from Amazon or whether it's entire beds being delivered. They can do all their research. They are comfortable buying online. They can arrange all of their financing without ever leaving their house. The one thing that dealerships offer on the sales side, not the service side, is the ability to test drive the car before you decide to buy. Sure, the salesman, if he's actually competent at what he does, knows some of the ins and outs of the different packages and can answer some questions around that, because manufacturers make it as complicated as possible. But all I need to do is drive the car. I want to make sure that before I spend that $40,000 or $50,000, that it rides comfortable, that I'm comfortable in the seat, that the ergonomics work for me, and of course the materials and things like that. Dealerships have become increasingly powerful over the decades, and most states have put laws in place to say manufacturers cannot sell directly to the customer. They have to use a dealership model. And through this period of COVID, you've seen an increase in manufacturers have realized that people are comfortable ordering online and most of the time delivering through the dealer. I think this increases their profit margin. It certainly increases their ability to control their supply and manufacturing chain. But it's got to be eye-opening to them, and certainly when you look at Tesla. Tesla basically offers a showroom and you order online. Now, they've been involved in legal fights in many states, including my own, but that existing franchise laws that protect the dealers start to erode when you have a new manufacturer that's not using a dealership model. Tesla, Lucid, and Rivian, I believe, are all going that way, and I believe VinFast is going to as well. That puts a traditional dealer with their really complicated and miserable experience up against a more modern 21st century approach where you can go drive the car and then place an order. It makes sense to me for dealerships to look at the resistance they are putting into the sales process. And somebody needs to decide, we're going to do it differently. I don't know if there's going to be a new dealership model that comes out, or if existing dealers are going to start changing to it. But a showroom where you walk in, you've got several terminals, you can look at their different models. There's a couple of examples maybe of each one. You can drive it to make sure you're comfortable with it. Maybe even VR goggles where you can actually experience it, walk around, change the colors, see the dashboard and everything else, and then have a service section attached to it. Financing can be done online. I think the dealership model is going to collapse under its own weight because I hate going to the dealership. I actively avoid going to the dealership, and I'm not alone. And the dealerships have brought this on themselves by making the sales process complicated, convoluted, time-consuming, and designed to wear down customers while literally stealing every single dollar out of their pocket with unnecessary add-ons and upsells. I'm looking forward to new manufacturers and new dealerships revolutionizing this model. And I believe there's got to be some dealerships out there, existing dealerships, who look and say, why do we own 10 acres of land and several hundred or thousand cars when we could have 2 representative samples of every single model, a modern open space, and we sell everything at the same price? I believe it'll work, and I believe strongly customer satisfaction would go through the roof. It's time to have it changed. I just hope it happens before traditional dealerships find themselves completely outflanked and unable to compete with more nimble and modern sales paths with newer manufacturers. Let me know your thoughts below, guys. Thanks.